What secrets lie buried beneath the sands of Egypt? Beyond the gold, beyond the pharaohs, lies the ultimate mystery. A map to navigate eternity, spells to conquer death itself. Are you ready to unlock it? Welcome to the Purple Files. Today we delve into one of history's most enigmatic collections of writings, the ancient Egyptian texts we commonly call the Book of the Dead. But that very name is misleading, a modern label for something far more profound. Forget the image of a single, sinister book. What the Egyptians possessed was a vital guide for the soul's perilous journey after life. Please remember to subscribe if you enjoy my videos. In the 19th century, early Egyptologists encountering these scrolls buried with the dead coined the term Book of the Dead. However, the Egyptians themselves knew these collections by a name that speaks volumes about their true purpose: Ru Nu Peret Emheru. This translates to the chapters, or the spells for coming forth by day. Coming forth by day. This wasn't about death, but about rebirth and movement. It signified the soul's ability to leave the darkness of the tomb, to greet the sun god Ra each morning, to travel freely through the afterlife realm, the Duat, and ultimately to achieve a glorious, eternal existence among the gods. These were not mere prayers. They were powerful tools, instruments of sacred magic the Egyptians called Heka. Often personalized for the individual, these scrolls contained a carefully selected arsenal of spells, hymns, passwords, and crucial knowledge inscribed on papyrus. Many were adorned with intricate illustrations, or vignettes, depicting the challenges and triumphs awaiting the deceased. This was essential spiritual technology, a divine survival kit designed to empower the soul. With these spells, the deceased could face the final judgment, repel terrifying demons, secure vital sustenance like food and water, navigate the complex paths of the afterlife, and even transform into powerful beings. Over the next 90 to 120 minutes, we embark on an exceptionally deep dive into these sacred chapters. We will trace their evolution over thousands of years, from ancient pyramid texts to the familiar scrolls of the New Kingdom. We will explore the Egyptians' detailed vision of the cosmos and the soul's journey within it. We will meet the key deities presiding over death and judgment. Osiris, the lord of the underworld; Anubis, the guide and embalmer; Thoth, the scribe of the gods; and Ma'at, the embodiment of truth and cosmic order. We will unravel the principles of Egyptian magic and how these spells were believed to work. We will examine the vast array of spell types, from basic protection to achieving divine power. We will scrutinize some of the most critical spells in detail, including the famous spell 30B for safeguarding the heart during judgment, and spell 125, the dramatic negative confession before the gods. We'll contrast the Hollywood myths of curses with the profound spiritual quest these texts represent. Prepare yourself. We are about to pull back the veil on ancient Egypt's most sophisticated attempt to understand and overcome mortality. Our journey into the authentic spells for coming forth by day begins now. So, we've established the Egyptians didn't have one single Book of the Dead. This is fundamental. Unlike centrally codified scriptures like the Bible or the Quran, there was no single, authorized version, no universally accepted table of contents. Think of it less like a novel and more like a vast, evolving library of magical options, a repertoire of spells from which individuals, or those preparing their burials, could choose. What we find instead are numerous individual papyrus scrolls, discovered in tombs, each containing a unique selection and arrangement of spells. Some scrolls might be incredibly long and elaborate, containing nearly 200 distinct chapters, beautifully illustrated in color. Others might be much shorter, perhaps containing only a few spells deemed most essential or affordable for the deceased. The quality varied immensely too, from luxurious masterpieces commissioned by royalty and high officials, written by expert scribes and artists, to simpler, almost mass-produced versions for those of lesser means. Some were written in formal hieroglyphs, the detailed pictorial script we often associate with monuments, while others used hieratic, a cursive script better suited for writing quickly on papyrus. This variability underscores a key point. These were practical tools, tailored to individual needs and resources. The collection of spells chosen for a specific person reflected their status, their budget, and perhaps even their personal anxieties about the afterlife journey. A warrior might prioritize spells for overcoming monstrous enemies, while a scribe might include extra hymns to Thoth, the god of wisdom and writing. Now let's revisit that crucial Egyptian name, Ru-Nu-Peretemheru, the spells for coming forth by day. What does this truly signify? It encapsulates the core aspiration of the deceased in the Egyptian worldview. Death was not seen as an absolute end, but as a transition, a dangerous passage that, if navigated successfully, led to a transformed state of being. Coming forth refers quite literally to the ability of the deceased's spirit, specifically aspects like the Ba, often depicted as a human-headed bird representing personality and mobility, to leave the confines of the dark, silent tomb. The tomb housed the physical body, the mummy, which needed to be preserved, but the spirit needed freedom. By day connects this freedom directly to the life-giving power of the sun god Ra. Each morning, as Ra began his journey across the sky in his solar bark, the blessed dead, the Aku, effective spirits, hoped to emerge from the underworld, or their tombs, into the daylight. This meant rejoining the world of the living in a spiritual sense, perhaps visiting loved ones, partaking in offerings left at the tomb, or traveling with Ra across the heavens and through the underworld at night. It symbolized regeneration, activity, and continued existence, the opposite of the static inertia of death. Therefore, coming forth by day wasn't just about escaping the tomb, it was about achieving a dynamic, cyclical existence, integrated with the cosmic order represented by the sun's daily journey. It was about overcoming the oblivion and paralysis of death to become an active, mobile, and powerful spirit, capable of interacting with both the divine and earthly realms. The spells contained within these scrolls were the keys, the magical utterances, the divine knowledge needed to unlock this freedom and ensure the deceased could indeed come forth by day, every day, for eternity. These were not chapters of death, but chapters against death, chapters for eternal life and movement. To understand the necessity of the spells for coming forth by day, we must first journey into the realm they were designed to conquer, the Egyptian afterlife, known as the Duat. Forget simple notions of heaven or hell. The Duat was imagined as a complex, multifaceted, and profoundly dangerous landscape through which the deceased, and even the sun god Ra himself, had to travel every single night. The Duat wasn't simply underground, it was a liminal space, existing parallel to the world of the living, sometimes conceptualized as being beneath the earth, but also in the sky, specifically the night sky, traversed by the stars. It was a realm of darkness, mystery, and transformation. Its geography was detailed in other funerary texts like the Amduat, that which is in the afterlife, and the Book of Gates, which often complemented the Book of the Dead. These texts describe the Duat as being divided into 12 sections, representing the 12 hours of the night, each with its own unique challenges, landscapes, and inhabitants. Imagine a world filled with rivers of fire, lakes of boiling water, vast caverns, and treacherous pathways. It was populated not only by gods and the blessed dead, but also by terrifying demons, monstrous serpents like the archfiend Apep, and fearsome guardians armed with knives who blocked crucial passages. These weren't abstract concepts, they were imminent threats the soul had to overcome. The journey through the Duat was often conceived as mirroring the nightly voyage of the sun god Ra. After setting in the west, Ra entered the Duat in his solar bark, bringing light and order to its dark regions. He traveled through the 12 hours of the night, battling forces of chaos led by Apep, regenerating his power and emerging reborn in the east at dawn. The deceased soul aimed to join Ra on this journey, or at the very least, undertake a parallel voyage, benefiting from the sun god's passage and protection. Navigating the Duat required immense knowledge and magical power. The deceased needed to know the names of the gates, the guardians who watched over them, and the specific spells required to pacify or bypass them. They needed protection against serpents, crocodiles, and demons who sought to devour the soul or obstruct its path. They had to cross fiery lakes and avoid being turned upside down, a terrifying fate where one would be forced to consume their own excrement. The spells for coming forth by day provided this essential knowledge, acting as a divine GPS and a magical shield. Spells specifically named gates, addressed guardians, repelled hostile creatures, and ensured the deceased wouldn't lose their way or succumb to the Duat's horrors. Successfully traversing the Duat was a prerequisite for reaching the ultimate destination, the Hall of Ma'at, the Hall of Judgment. Here, the deceased would face Osiris and the 42 divine assessors, where their heart would be weighed against the feather of truth. But this crucial trial could only be reached after surviving the perilous journey through the Duat. The entire process was an ordeal, a test of purity, knowledge, and magical preparedness. The Duat was the crucible where the soul was tested, purified, and potentially destroyed, or from which it could emerge, justified and ready for eternal life in the field of reeds, the Egyptian paradise. The spells were the lifeline, the essential guide through this cosmic underworld. The journey through the Duat and the final judgment were not solitary affairs. The deceased navigated this perilous realm under the watchful eyes of powerful deities, gods who held the keys to death, resurrection, and eternal life. Understanding these key players is crucial to grasping the purpose of the Book of the Dead. Let's meet the divine tribunal presiding over the afterlife. First and foremost is Osiris, Lord of the underworld, God of the dead, and symbol of resurrection. His own story is central to Egyptian beliefs about death and rebirth. Murdered and dismembered by his jealous brother Set, Osiris was painstakingly reassembled and magically revived by his devoted wife Isis and sister Nephthys. Though restored, he could no longer rule in the land of the living and became the sovereign ruler of the Duat. He represented the promise of life after death. In art, he's typically shown as a mummified pharaoh, often with green or black skin symbolizing fertility and the underworld, wearing the distinctive crown and holding the crook and flail, symbols of kingship and authority. The ultimate goal for many deceased Egyptians was to be justified in his presence and become an Osiris themselves, identified with his resurrection. The spells often directly address Osiris, seeking his favor and protection. Next is Anubis, the solemn guide. Instantly recognizable with his black jackal head, Anubis presided over the sacred rites of mummification and embalming, processes essential for preserving the physical body for the afterlife. He was the opener of the ways, guiding the souls of the dead through the threshold between the living world and the Duat. He played a critical role in the Hall of Judgment, where he was often depicted adjusting the sacred scales during the weighing of the heart ceremony, ensuring accuracy and fairness. Anubis was a protector of tombs and cemeteries, a liminal deity bridging life and death. Prayers and spells invoking Anubis sought his guidance and protection during the embalming process and the soul's initial journey into the afterlife. Then we have Thoth, the god of wisdom, knowledge, writing, and magic, or Heka. Often depicted with the head of an ibis or sometimes as a baboon, Thoth was the divine scribe, the master of hieroglyphs and sacred texts. His role in the afterlife was vital. In the Hall of Judgment, as the heart was weighed against the feather of truth, it was Thoth who meticulously recorded the verdict. His wisdom was considered essential for navigating the Duat, and many spells within the Book of the Dead were attributed to him or invoked his power. He represented the intellect and sacred knowledge needed to overcome the challenges of eternity. Scribes held him in particularly high esteem. Finally, there is Ma'at. Ma'at is more than just a goddess. She is the fundamental principle of cosmic order, truth, balance, justice, and righteousness that govern the universe, the state, and individual conduct. She is often depicted as a woman with a single ostrich feather in her headband, and it is this feather against which the deceased's heart was weighed. To live according to Ma'at meant living ethically, honestly, and in harmony with the divine order. A heart heavy with sin, heavier than the feather of Ma'at, resulted in annihilation, being devoured by the terrifying demoness Amit. A heart in balance signified a life lived in accordance with Ma'at, leading to justification and eternal life. The famous spell 125, The negative confession was a declaration before the gods that the deceased had lived according to Ma'at's principles. These 4 deities, Osiris, the resurrected king, Anubis, the sacred guide, Thoth, the divine scribe, and Ma'at, the embodiment of truth, formed the core panel overseeing the soul's transition. The spells for coming forth by day were the deceased's script, their legal defense, and their magical toolkit for successfully interacting with these powerful gods. The potency of the spells for coming forth by day resided not only in the spoken magic, but also in their physical form. These were carefully crafted objects, scrolls meant to function within the tomb and aid the soul's journey. The materials themselves held deep significance. The foundation was papyrus, derived from the tall reeds abundant in the Nile Delta marshes. Crafting papyrus was an art. The plant's inner pith was sliced into thin strips. One layer of strips was laid vertically, another horizontally on top. These were pressed and hammered together, the plant's own sap acting as a binder, creating a single durable sheet after drying. Individual sheets were joined to form long scrolls, sometimes stretching for many meters, offering a vast canvas for the vital texts and images. This provided a portable and extensive medium for recording sacred knowledge. These scrolls often contained more than just words. They featured intricate illustrations called vignettes. These images, varying from simple ink outlines to vibrant, detailed paintings, were essential components. They visually represented the spell's purpose or narrative, showing the deceased performing a ritual, navigating the Duat, meeting a god, or achieving a desired transformation. Vignettes acted as visual affirmations of the spell's success, reinforcing the text's meaning and potentially holding magical power themselves, helping to manifest the spell's goal. The famous vignette for spell 125, for example, clearly depicts the weighing of the heart, visually guiding the soul through this critical event. The sacred words themselves were inscribed using Egypt's unique writing systems. 2 primary forms appear on these scrolls. Hieroglyphs, the detailed pictorial signs known from monuments, were used for formal religious texts and titles, representing sounds, objects, or ideas. More common for the main body of text on scrolls was hieratic, a cursive script derived from hieroglyphs but simplified for faster writing with brush and ink on papyrus. This script allowed for the efficient recording of the extensive spells needed. Texts were typically arranged in columns or horizontal lines. Scribes used black ink made from carbon soot for the main text, while red ink, made from ochre, often highlighted titles, spell numbers, or words signifying danger or importance. The combination of resilient papyrus, potent vignettes, and the sacred script, whether formal hieroglyphs or flowing hieratic, elevated these scrolls beyond mere documents. They became powerful ritual artifacts, conduits of magic and knowledge, meticulously prepared to equip the deceased for the ultimate journey toward eternal life. In the ancient Egyptian worldview, magic was not mere superstition, it was Heka, the fundamental power woven into the very fabric of creation. Heka was the primordial energy the gods themselves wielded to bring forth the cosmos and maintain its order. It was an activating force, present from the beginning, infusing all things. This power was so essential that Heka was also revered as a god, a divine protector who safeguarded the sun god Ra during his perilous nightly voyage through the Duat. Heka itself was neutral, a potent cosmic current that could be channeled and directed. The Egyptians believed this cosmic force could be accessed and utilized through specific means, particularly through spells like those gathered in collections for the afterlife. Central to this was the profound power inherent in words. Speaking the correct formulas, the precise divine utterances, was thought to actively shape reality. Words held creative force. Creation myths often described gods bringing existence into being simply by speaking names. The sacred script, hieroglyphs, were especially potent, acting as conduits of the realities they depicted. Writing a spell gave it enduring power. Reciting it aloud activated its magic. Equally vital was the power contained within names. Knowing the true name of any entity, god, demon, or obstacle granted influence over it. Many spells focused on learning or declaring the names of fearsome guardians or hostile beings encountered in the Duat, effectively neutralizing their threat. Protecting one's own name while mastering the names of power was a critical skill for the soul's journey. Heka's activation often involved more than just words. Ritual actions were frequently intertwined with verbal spells. Specific gestures, the use of magically charged amulets, the symbolic power of illustrations, or the offering of certain substances all contributed to a spell's efficacy. The vignettes painted onto papyrus scrolls served as visual enactments, reinforcing the spell's intent and helping manifest its desired outcome. Egyptian magic, Heka, was thus a sophisticated system for engaging with the universe's underlying energies. It combined belief, ritual performance, spoken incantations, sacred writing, and potent imagery. The spells designed for the deceased were functional instruments, empowered by Heka. They were intended to actively shape the soul's post-mortem reality, enabling it to command passage, overcome dangers, and achieve the ultimate goal, to successfully come forth by day into eternal life. The collection, known as the Spells for Coming Forth by Day, was not a random assortment of incantations. While the specific selection varied from scroll to scroll, the spells themselves can be grouped into several broad categories, each addressing a distinct need or challenge faced by the deceased on their journey through the afterlife. One major category involved transformation spells. The Egyptians believed the soul needed the ability to change form to navigate different realms or overcome specific obstacles. These spells allowed the deceased to transform into various powerful or agile creatures, a falcon to soar through the heavens, a swift swallow, a potent serpent, or even a lotus flower, symbolizing rebirth. Transformation was key to mobility and adaptability in the complex landscape of the Duat. Issued out of sight in most windows, the protection with crocodiles would present no threat. A divide teemed with dangers, from monstrous demons and fiery serpents like Apep, to treacherous terrain and hostile gatekeepers. These spells acted as magical armor and weaponry. They provided incantations to repel crocodiles, ward off snakes, extinguish fiery lakes, and pacify the fearsome guardians who demanded secret knowledge before granting passage. They ensured the soul's safety against annihilation or obstruction. Spells for provision and sustenance were also essential. Even in the afterlife, the deceased required nourishment. These spells magically guaranteed a perpetual supply of food and drink, bread, beer, oxen, fowl, often depicted in accompanying vignettes. They ensured the deceased would not suffer hunger or thirst for eternity and could partake in the offerings presented at their tomb. A crucial set of spells related to the judgment. Foremost among these was spell 1225, containing the negative confession, where the deceased declared their innocence before Osiris and the 42 assessors, asserting they had lived according to Ma'at. Other spells aimed to ensure the heart did not betray the deceased during the weighing ceremony, or to prevent the heart from being removed or stolen. These were vital for passing the final test and achieving justification. Finally, there were spells for movement and freedom. These directly addressed the core purpose encapsulated in the Egyptian title, Coming Forth by Day. They granted the soul the ability to leave the tomb, to travel freely between the underworld and the world of the living, to join the sun god Ra in his solar bark, and to navigate the various regions of the afterlife, including reaching the blessed field of reeds. These spells ensured the soul was not confined, but could move and exist dynamically for eternity. Together, these diverse categories of spells formed a comprehensive spiritual toolkit, designed to equip the deceased with the magical power needed to overcome every conceivable challenge of death and secure a successful, eternal existence. Central to the entire collection of afterlife texts is the very concept enshrined in its ancient name, the spells for coming forth by day. This phrase captures the ultimate aspiration of the deceased, the ability to transcend the darkness and confinement of the tomb and re-engage with the world of light and life, albeit in a transformed spiritual state. The spells dedicated to this purpose were among the most crucial. The tomb, while a necessary vessel for preserving the body and housing funerary goods, was also seen as a potential prison. Without the correct magical empowerment, the soul risked being trapped within its stone walls for eternity. These specific spells provided the metaphysical keys to unlock the tomb's doors. They granted the deceased the power to freely exit and re-enter their burial place at will. This freedom of movement was multifaceted. It allowed the soul, often represented as the Ba, a human-headed bird, to fly out into the sunlight each morning. This enabled the deceased to witness the daily rebirth of the sun god Ra, perhaps even to join his entourage aboard the solar bark as it traversed the sky, drawing strength and rejuvenation from its divine light. Furthermore, these spells facilitated interaction with the world of the living. The soul could revisit familiar places, observe earthly events, and, importantly, partake spiritually in the offerings left by relatives and priests at the tomb chapel. This maintained a vital connection between the dead and the living, ensuring the deceased was remembered and sustained. Incantations within this category often included powerful declarations of freedom, asserting the deceased's right to move without hindrance. They might invoke divine authority or identify the deceased with gods known for their mobility, like Horus the falcon. The spells essentially empowered the soul to overcome the physical limitations of death, transforming the tomb from a final resting place into a functional base for eternal, dynamic existence. They ensured the deceased was not merely interred but truly liberated to come forth by day. The journey through the Duat was fraught with peril. Far from being a peaceful passage, the Egyptian underworld teemed with hostile entities and hazardous landscapes designed to test, obstruct, or even annihilate the unprepared soul. Consequently, a significant portion of the spells for coming forth by day was dedicated purely to protection, acting as a vital arsenal of magical defenses. These protective spells addressed a terrifying array of threats. Monstrous demons, grotesque beings armed with knives lurked in the shadows, eager to ensnare or dismember the soul. Chief among the cosmic horrors was Apep, the colossal serpent of chaos, who perpetually sought to swallow the sun god Ra's bark during its nightly journey, a fate the deceased, hoping to join Ra, also had to avoid. The waterways of the Duat were infested with aggressive crocodiles waiting to devour the unwary, while venomous snakes slithered through its hidden paths. Even the geography posed dangers. Lakes of fire threatened to consume the soul, and narrow passages were guarded by fearsome gatekeepers who demanded secret names and passwords before granting entry. Without the correct magical knowledge and power, the soul risked being trapped, tormented, or utterly destroyed, failing to reach the final judgment and the promise of eternal life. The spells provided the necessary countermeasures. Some acted as impenetrable shields, creating zones of safety around the deceased. Others were offensive, offering incantations to actively repel or subdue attackers, words to drive back crocodiles, formulas to decapitate serpents, or pronouncements to pacify enraged demons. Specific spells addressed the guardians of the gates and pylons, equipping the soul with the required knowledge of their secret names and natures, thus neutralizing their threat and compelling them to grant passage. These potent utterances were the soul's armor and sword in the face of oblivion. They transformed the vulnerable deceased into a magically empowered entity, capable of confronting and overcoming the myriad dangers of the underworld. They were essential insurance, safeguarding the integrity of the soul and ensuring its safe passage through the treacherous realms of the Duat towards the ultimate goal of justification and eternal peace in the field of Reed. The afterlife, as conceived by the ancient Egyptians, was not a static realm but a dynamic, multi-layered reality. To navigate its diverse landscapes and interact with its varied inhabitants, the soul required more than just protection. It needed adaptability. This is where the powerful spells of transformation came into play, granting the deceased the extraordinary ability to change their form at will. These shape-shifting spells were fundamental to the soul's mobility and empowerment within the Duat and beyond. By reciting the correct incantations, the deceased could shed their human form, or even their mummified state, and assume the shape of various creatures, each possessing unique advantages or symbolic significance. The common and highly desired transformation was into a falcon. This powerful bird, closely associated with the sky god Horus and the sun god Ra, represented divine power, keen sight, and the freedom to soar high above the underworld, reaching the heavens and accompanying the solar bark. Becoming a falcon granted unparalleled mobility and a connection to the celestial realm. Other transformations offered different benefits. Changing into a swift swallow allowed for agile movement and symbolized rebirth, as swallows returned reliably each spring. Assuming the form of a serpent, particularly the Uraeus cobra, invoked protective power and royal authority, enabling the soul to navigate hidden paths or confront enemies. Transformation into a lotus flower emerging from the primordial waters signified resurrection and creative potential, echoing the birth of the sun god at the dawn of time. The deceased might even seek to transform into gods themselves, or into elements like fire or air, demonstrating ultimate mastery over form. These spells were not merely about disguise, they were about acquiring the essential nature and abilities of the chosen form. They allowed the soul to overcome physical limitations, traverse difficult terrains, evade specific dangers, or align itself with potent symbols of regeneration and divinity. The power to shapeshift was a testament to the soul's successful transition into a being of enhanced capabilities, fully equipped to exist eternally in the complex tapestry of the afterlife. While the afterlife journey was primarily spiritual, the ancient Egyptians believed that certain fundamental needs persisted beyond death, albeit perhaps in a more metaphysical sense. The deceased still required sustenance, food, water, and even air to maintain their existence for eternity. The spells for coming forth by day included specific provisions to magically guarantee these necessities, ensuring the soul would never suffer deprivation. Physical offerings left at the tomb, bread, beer, meat, vegetables, were crucial, providing a tangible link between the living and the dead. However, the Egyptians recognized that these physical offerings might eventually cease or be insufficient for eternity. Therefore, spells were employed to transform these offerings, or even mere depictions of them, into an endless magical supply. These spells for sustenance ensured that the deceased would always have access to nourishment. Reciting the appropriate formulas activated the offerings, guaranteeing a perpetual feast in the afterlife. Accompanying vignettes often depicted lavish offering tables piled high, reinforcing the spell's intent and visually manifesting abundance. The spells essentially declared the deceased's right to partake in divine provisions, ensuring they would never experience hunger or thirst in the field of reeds or other blessed realms. Beyond food and drink, the very air or breath of life was considered essential. The tomb, being sealed, represented potential suffocation. Spells were included to ensure the deceased could always breathe freely, granting them the sweet breath of the north wind. This wasn't just about physical respiration, but symbolized continued life, animation, and the ability to speak the powerful words of other spells. Spell 59, for example, is explicitly titled Spell for Breathing Air and Having Power Over Water in the Necropolis. These spells addressed the fundamental fear of eternal want. They provided magical insurance against hunger, thirst, and suffocation, ensuring the deceased was fully equipped not just to survive the afterlife, but to thrive within it. By guaranteeing perpetual access to food, water, and air, these incantations help secure a comfortable and well-provisioned eternal existence, freeing the soul to focus on the loftier goals of spiritual progression and divine communion. The Duat, the Egyptian underworld, was not conceived as a single location, but as a vast, intricate, and often bewildering landscape. It comprised multiple regions, winding waterways, fiery lakes, and a series of heavily guarded gates or pylons that barred passage between realms. Successfully traversing this complex geography was a major challenge for the deceased soul, requiring divine guidance and specialized knowledge provided by specific spells. These spells for navigation essentially acted as magical maps and guidebooks for the afterlife. Some spells provided descriptions of the paths to be taken, warning of hazards, and pointing towards safe routes leading to Osiris or the blessed field of reeds. They equipped the soul with the necessary orientation to avoid getting lost in the confusing and dangerous expanses of the underworld. A critical aspect of this navigation involved confronting the numerous guardians stationed at the thresholds between different zones. These fearsome beings, often depicted as monstrous composites of human, animal, and divine elements, armed with menacing knives, were tasked with preventing unworthy souls from progressing. They would challenge the deceased, demanding proof of their knowledge and purity. Here, the power of knowing names became paramount. Many spells were dedicated solely to listing the secret names of these gatekeepers, the gates themselves, and even the various parts of the gates, lintels, doorposts, bolts. The Egyptians believed that knowing the true, hidden name of any entity granted power over it. By reciting the correct names, the deceased demonstrated their magical proficiency and rightful authority, compelling the guardians to stand aside and allow passage. This wasn't merely about passwords, it was a display of esoteric knowledge, proving the soul was initiated and worthy. Spells like Spell 1244 and 1247 meticulously list the names required to pass a series of gates and mounds. Failure to know these names meant being turned back or potentially destroyed. Therefore, these spells for navigation and knowing names were indispensable tools. They provided the deceased with the celestial cartography and the secret keys needed to unlock the paths of the Duat. Mastering this knowledge ensured safe passage through hostile territories, neutralized potential threats, and ultimately enabled the soul to reach its final destination and achieve eternal life. Deep Dive, Spell 30, Be Preventing the Heart's Testimony. Among the most critical moments in the deceased's journey through the Duat was the weighing of the heart ceremony, presided over by Osiris in the Hall of Two Truths. Here, the deceased's heart, the Ib, believed by the Egyptians to be the seat of intelligence, memory, emotion, and conscience, was weighed on a great scale against the feather of Maat, the goddess representing truth, balance, and cosmic order. If the heart was lighter then, or equal in weight to the feather, the deceased was declared true of voice, Makeru, and granted passage to the eternal paradise of the field of reeds. If the heart was heavy with sin and wrongdoing, it outweighed the feather, and the deceased faced the terrifying prospect of final annihilation, being devoured by the monstrous Amit, a composite beast waiting beside the scales. Naturally, the deceased felt considerable anxiety about this judgment. What if their heart, containing the complete record of their life, including every misstep and transgression, decided to testify against them at this crucial moment? This fear gave rise to one of the most important spells in the collection, Spell 30b. The purpose of Spell 30b was explicit: to prevent the deceased's own heart from bearing witness against them during the weighing ceremony. It was a direct appeal, a magical injunction addressed to the heart itself. While variations exist, the core text typically includes lines such as, "O my heart of my mother, O my heart of my mother, O my heart of my different forms. Do not stand up against me as witness, do not oppose me in the tribunal, do not be hostile towards me in the presence of the keeper of the balance. You are my Ka within my body, the Khanum who makes sound my limbs. May you go forth to the place of happiness whereto we speed. Do not make my name stink to the entourage who make men. Do not tell lies against me in the presence of the god." This spell is essentially a plea for silence and cooperation. The deceased reminds the heart of their intimate connection, my heart of my mother, my Ka within my body, and implores it not to create opposition or make my name stink, become infamous, before the divine judges and assessors. It's a magical safeguard against self-incrimination at the most critical juncture. The Heart Scarab Amulet. Spell 30b is famously associated with the Heart Scarab. This large scarab beetle amulet, often carved from green stone, like green jasper, serpentine, or basalt, colors associated with regeneration, was typically inscribed with Spell 30b on its flat underside. During the mummification process, this amulet was placed directly over the deceased's heart, nestled within the mummy wrappings. The scarab beetle itself, Khepri, was a powerful symbol of rebirth and self-creation. Placing this amulet inscribed with Spell 30b over the heart served a dual purpose. It physically and magically protected the heart organ, and it ensured the constant presence and efficacy of the spell's protective power during the perilous judgment. It was a vital piece of funerary equipment, designed to directly influence the outcome of the weighing ceremony and secure the deceased's eternal future. Spell 30b and the Heart Scarab represent a fascinating insight into Egyptian beliefs about conscience, judgment, and the power of magic to navigate the challenges of the afterlife. It wasn't necessarily about denying guilt, but about magically ensuring the heart remained a silent, supportive partner in achieving justification before Osiris. Deep Dive. Spell 125 Declarations of Innocence in the Hall of Judgment. Spell 125 represents the spiritual and judicial climax of the soul's journey through the Duat. It takes place within the imposing Hall of Two Truths, or Hall of Judgment, the sacred court where the deceased must stand before Osiris, the lord of the underworld, and a tribunal of 42 divine assessors to prove their worthiness for eternal life. This spell is not merely an incantation, but a formal, ritualized declaration of moral purity, often referred to as the negative confession, or more accurately, the declaration of innocence. The setting and procedure. Upon entering the hall, the deceased first addresses Osiris and the great gods present, proclaiming their reverence and, crucially, demonstrating their knowledge by naming them correctly. This act of knowing and naming establishes their connection to the divine realm. The central event, however, is the declaration before the 42 Asasi gods. Each of these deities represented a specific known province of Egypt, or a particular type of sin, and together they formed the jury for the deceased's life. The negative confession. The core of spell 1.25 involves the deceased addressing each of the 42 assessors individually, by name, and denying having committed a specific corresponding sin. This is why it's called the negative confession rather than confessing sins. The deceased lists the sins they have not done. The structure is typically Hail, the name of assessor god, who comes forth from Speseta god, who comes forth from Spe, who comes from Spes. The list of denied sins is remarkably comprehensive, covering a wide spectrum of human behavior and reflecting the ancient Egyptian ethical code, deeply intertwined with the concept of ma'at, truth, balance, order, justice. Examples include crimes against others. I have not committed murder. I have not stolen. I have not caused pain. I have not committed adultery. I have not spoken falsely. I have not eavesdropped. Crimes against the gods. I have not blasphemed. I have not diminished the offerings. I have not defiled the property of a god. Social and economic transgressions. I have not cheated in the fields. I have not altered the grain measure. I have not tampered with the weights of the balance. I have not deprived a child of milk. Environmental/resource related. I have not dammed running water. I have not extinguished a fire in its hour. Emotional/intentional wrongs. I have not been angry without cause. I have not been deaf to words of truth. I have not stirred up strife, purpose and significance. The recitation of spell 125 served multiple purposes. Moral justification. It was the primary means for the deceased to assert their adherence to Ma'at throughout their life. Demonstration of knowledge. Correctly naming all 42 assessors proved the deceased possessed the necessary sacred knowledge. Magical efficacy. Like other spells, this declaration was believed to have performative power. By stating their innocence so comprehensively in this sacred space, the deceased magically reinforced that state of purity, helping to counteract any minor failings the heart, see spell 30b, might otherwise reveal. It aimed to ritually purify the deceased before the final verdict. Ethical blueprint. The list provides invaluable insight into what ancient Egyptians considered right and wrong conduct, forming a detailed moral guide. Connection to the weighing of the heart. The declaration of innocence is intrinsically linked to the weighing of the heart ceremony, often described alongside or immediately following spell 125. Successfully reciting this spell, demonstrating both moral integrity and sacred knowledge, was believed to directly influence the scales. A soul who could truthfully or magically assert the truth of this declaration was expected to have a heart light enough to balance against Ma'at's feather. Spell 125 therefore stands as the ultimate test. It combined ethical accountability with ritual performance and magical knowledge, representing the deceased's final, formal plea for acceptance into the eternal paradise ruled by Osiris. Passing this test meant being declared Ma'keru, true of voice, and achieving the ultimate goal, eternal life in the field of reeds. Deep Dive, Spell 17. Understanding the mysteries of being and becoming. Spell 17 stands out within the spells for coming forth by day for its length, its profound theological content, and its unique structure, often incorporating glosses or explanatory comments directly within the text. It's less about a single action, like passing a gate or weighing the heart, and more about establishing the deceased's fundamental identity, cosmic significance, and integration into the divine order through knowledge and identification. It delves into the very mysteries of creation, existence, and divinity. Identification with the Supreme Creator. A central element of Spell 17 is the deceased's bold declaration of identity with the highest creator gods, primarily Atum, the self-created primordial deity, and Ra, the sun god, ruler of the cosmos. The spell often begins with lines like, "I am Atum at his rising. I am the great god who came into being by himself." By asserting this unity, the deceased claims a share in the god's primordial power, creative potential, and eternal nature. They are not just joining the gods, they are asserting that, on a fundamental level, they are divine. On cosmological explanations, Class 17 is famous for its self-commentary. The main text makes profound statements, often followed by a question like, "What does it mean?" and then an explanatory gloss. For example, after identifying with a deity or mentioning a mythical event, the text might explain who that god is, what that event represents, or the hidden meaning behind a divine symbol, like the Ujat Eye. This structure emphasizes that true power comes not just from reciting words, but from understanding the deep cosmic truths they represent. It's a spell focused on initiation into divine knowledge, victory over chaos and enemies. The spell reaffirms the deceased's triumph over chaos, often symbolized by the serpent Apep, the eternal enemy of Ra. By identifying with Ra/Atum, the deceased also takes on their role as protectors of Ma'at, cosmic order, and vanquishers of Isfet, chaos. It asserts their ability to navigate the dangers of the Duat and repel any hostile forces. For affirmation of eternal cycles and transformation, the spell connects the deceased to the perpetual cycles of the cosmos, the rising and setting of the sun, death and rebirth. It ensures their participation in this eternal rhythm, guaranteeing their resurrection and ability to come forth by day from the necropolis. It affirms their transformation into an Aki, an effective and glorified spirit possessing mobility and power, divine recognition and acceptance. Through its declarations and demonstrations of knowledge, Spell 17 serves as a presentation of the deceased's credentials to the divine world. It proves they understand the cosmic order, know the secret names and natures of the gods, and are therefore worthy of acceptance into their eternal company. Spell 17 is essentially a profound statement of being and becoming. It equips the deceased with the ultimate knowledge, the understanding of their own divine essence and their place within the cosmos. It's a declaration of having achieved a state of enlightenment and power, ensuring not just survival, but a glorified existence integrated with the very fabric of creation. Its complexity and layered meanings reflect sophisticated theological speculation, aiming to elevate the deceased beyond mortality into the realm of the eternal gods through deep understanding and identification. It provides the foundational knowledge upon which many other spells rely, establishing the divine status required to successfully navigate the afterlife. While Osiris offered eternal life in the fertile fields of the Duat, another highly desired destiny for the ancient Egyptian soul was to ascend to the heavens and join the eternal journey of the sun god, Ra. This celestial afterlife represented ultimate transcendence, participation in the cosmic order, and direct communion with the king of the gods. Specific spells within the Book of the Dead were dedicated to facilitating this heavenly ascent. These spells for ascending to the sky provided the magical means for the soul, now transformed into an effective spirit or ark, to leave the underworld behind and rise into the celestial realm. The journey might involve magically traversing the sky, often envisioned as a celestial river like the Nile, upon which Ra sailed his solar bark. Transformation played a key role here as well. spells enabling the deceased to turn into birds, particularly the divine falcon, associated with Horus and Ra, or the Bennu bird, a heron representing rebirth and linked to Atum and Ra, were crucial for achieving the necessary flight. These forms allowed the soul to soar upwards, reaching the domain of the stars and the path of the sun. The ultimate goal was often to secure a place aboard Ra's magnificent solar bark. This vessel sailed across the sky during the day, bringing light and life to the world, and traversed the dangerous paths of the Duat at night, bringing regeneration before its triumphant rebirth at dawn. To be accepted into Ra's crew was a high honor, signifying complete integration into the divine, cosmic cycle. Spells would declare the deceased's fitness for this role, perhaps asserting their knowledge of navigation, their purity, or their ability to help defend the bark against the chaos serpent Apep during its nightly journey. These incantations often included phrases petitioning Ra directly, asking for passage, acceptance, and a permanent place among his divine entourage. They might affirm the deceased's identity with the stars themselves, particularly the imperishable stars that never set, symbolizing eternal existence. Spell 134, for instance, is titled Spell for Sailing in the Great Bark of Ra. Achieving this celestial destiny meant transcending the limitations of both earthly existence and the chthonic realms of the Duat. It represented becoming a being of pure light and spirit, forever traveling with the source of all life, participating in the endless cycle of sunrise and sunset, death and rebirth on a cosmic scale. These spells offered a path to becoming one with the eternal rhythm of the universe, sailing alongside the gods in the infinite expanse of the heavens. Beyond mere survival and safe passage, the ancient Egyptians desired an afterlife filled with power, agency, and enduring effectiveness. The soul wasn't meant to be a passive resident of paradise, but an active, potent entity. An Ak capable of interacting with its environment, retaining its identity, and wielding magical abilities. The spells for coming forth by day included numerous incantations specifically designed to grant and preserve these essential qualities. A significant category focused on transformation, Keperu. The ability to change form at will was considered a vital power. Spells allowed the deceased to transform into various creatures, each offering unique advantages. Birds granted mobility, the ability to fly to the heavens, escape confinement, or travel swiftly between the tomb and the world of the living, as the Ba, spell 77, for example, is spell for being transformed into a falcon of gold. Lotus flower symbolized rebirth and the sun's daily cycle, allowing the deceased to emerge beautifully each morning. Serpent represent a regeneration and primal energy, potentially offering protective qualities. Embodied power within the watery realms of the Duat allowed identification with divine creative power. Phoenix showed participation in the cycle of renewal. These transformations weren't arbitrary. They provided practical means for navigation, escape, accessing different realms, and asserting one's connection to divine principles. Other spells granted power over the environment within the necropolis. Spell 59, spell for breathing air and having power over water, ensured access to fundamental elements, preventing suffocation or drowning in the underworld's lakes and rivers. This control symbolized mastery over the conditions of the afterlife itself. Crucially, spells were included to preserve the deceased's identity and memory. Forgetting one's own name was tantamount to annihilation. Spells like Spell 25, spell for causing that a man remember his name in the necropolis, ensured the core identity remained intact. Similarly, spells prevented the loss of the head, seat of consciousness, or being forced to walk upside down, a state of utter helplessness and reversal of order. Spell 43 was specifically spell for preventing a man's decapitation in the necropolis. Mobility and agency were paramount. The concept of coming forth by day itself reflects this. The ability for the Bear spirit to leave the tomb during the daytime, interact with the world, and return to the mummy at night. Spells facilitated this movement, ensuring the deceased wasn't permanently trapped. They also guaranteed the ability to speak, having a mouth, which was essential not only for social interaction in the afterlife, but also for reciting the powerful spells needed for continued success. The opening of the mouth ceremony performed on the mummy was magically reinforced by spells ensuring this faculty persisted. Finally, spells directly addressed enduring existence, protecting the physical mummy from decay beyond mummification itself, and ensuring the ka, life force, and ba, mobile soul aspect, remained linked to the akach, effective spirit. These incantations collectively aimed to make the deceased a fully functional, powerful, and eternal being, capable of navigating, interacting, transforming, and thriving indefinitely within the complex realities of the afterlife. They ensured the afterlife wasn't just an end point, but a dynamic and potent state of being. The collection of spells we know as the Book of the Dead wasn't created all at once. It represents the culmination of nearly 1,500 years of evolving Egyptian funerary beliefs and practices, drawing upon earlier bodies of magical and religious texts. Its history reflects changes in Egyptian society, theology, and artistic expression. The earliest precursors were the pyramid texts. These spells, dating back to the 5th and 6th dynasties, were inscribed exclusively on the inner walls of the pyramids belonging to kings, and later queens. Purpose: primarily focused on ensuring the deceased pharaoh's successful transition to the celestial afterlife, guaranteeing their resurrection, ascent to the heavens, and transformation into a god, often joining the sun god Ra in his solar bark or becoming one of the imperishable stars. They also included protective spells for the royal body within the pyramid. Format: a collection of individual utterances rather than a structured book. Written in archaic hieroglyphs, often without illustrations. Audience: strictly royal. Following the collapse of the Old Kingdom, access to a provisioned afterlife began to democratize. High officials, nobles, and other non-royal elites sought the same protections and benefits previously reserved for pharaohs. This led to the development of the coffin texts. Purpose: continued the themes of the pyramid texts, celestial ascent, protection, but significantly expanded the repertoire. New spells emerged, focusing on the Osirian afterlife, judgment in the Hall of Two Truths, navigating the dangers of the Duat, underworld, and reaching the field of reeds. Spells for transformation into various forms became more common, as did spells granting power over elements and ensuring sustenance. Format: primarily painted or inscribed on the interior surfaces of wooden coffins. The number of spells grew considerably, around 1,185 known spells. While still individual spells, sometimes rudimentary groupings appeared. Illustrations remained rare. Audience: wealthy private individuals, officials, and regional governors. During the New Kingdom, the tradition evolved further, leading to what we now call the Book of the Dead, or more accurately, the spells for coming forth by day, et mhru. Purpose: consolidated and adapted spells from both the pyramid texts and coffin texts, while also adding new compositions reflecting contemporary beliefs. The focus balanced both the celestial, joining Ra, and chthonic, Osirian judgment, field of reeds, afterlives. Key spells like Spell 30b, Hard Scab, and Spell 125, Negative Confession, became central. Emphasis was placed on overcoming obstacles in the Duat, passing judgment and possessing power and mobility as an act. Format: typically written on papyrus scrolls, often accompanied by elaborate illustrations or vignettes depicting the spell's content or the afterlife journey. These scrolls were placed in the tomb, often within the coffin or among the mummy wrappings. While certain spells became standard inclusions, the selection, order, and number of spells varied greatly depending on the owner's preferences and budget. There was no single book, but rather customized collections. Audience: a much wider audience, including royalty, officials, priests, artisans, and anyone who could afford to commission a scroll. During the Saite dynasty, 26th dynasty, a period marked by a conscious revival and codification of older traditions, scribes attempted to standardize the Book of the Dead. Purpose: to create a definitive, authoritative version based on ancient sources. Format: this Saite recension established a relatively fixed sequence and selection of spells, typically numbering around 192 chapters. While variations still existed, this became the canonical version that was copied and used through the Ptolemaic period. Audience: continued use by those who could afford funerary preparations. From exclusive royal utterances carved in stone to illustrated papyrus scrolls available to a wider elite, the evolution of these funerary texts mirrors the changing landscape of Egyptian society and its enduring preoccupation with securing a successful and empowered existence after death. Each stage built upon the last, adapting ancient wisdom to new contexts and concerns, culminating in the rich and complex tapestry of the Book of the Dead. The Spells for Coming Forth by Day, or Book of the Dead, holds an immense legacy as one of our primary sources for understanding ancient Egyptian religion, funerary practices, ethics, and conceptions of the afterlife. Its texts and accompanying vignettes offer unparalleled insights into the hopes, fears, and spiritual aspirations of Egyptians across nearly 1,500 years. Its rediscovery and translation in the 19th century were pivotal moments in the development of Egyptology, opening a window into a complex and fascinating worldview. However, this profound religious document has also become shrouded in misconceptions, largely fueled by its dramatic name, a 19th century invention. The Egyptians called it the Spells for Coming Forth by Day, and its representation in modern popular culture. Perhaps the most pervasive misconception is that the Book of the Dead is a book of curses, capable of unleashing plagues, reanimating mummies to attack the living, or bringing misfortune upon those who disturb tombs. This is fundamentally incorrect. Purpose: the Book of the Dead spells were entirely focused on the protection, guidance, and empowerment of the deceased person on their journey through the afterlife. They were intended to help the soul overcome obstacles, pass judgment, achieve divinity, and secure eternal peace and happiness. They were tools for salvation, not malediction. Target audience: the spells were for the benefit of the tomb owner, not aimed outward at the living. Actual tomb warnings, while genuine warnings or deterrents against tomb robbers did sometimes exist in ancient Egypt, they were relatively rare, usually quite simple. As for any man who disturbs this tomb, the crocodile shall be against him in the water, the serpent against him on land. And entirely separate from the complex theological texts of the Book of the Dead, these warnings were straightforward threats, not elaborate magical incantations found within the funerary scrolls. The idea of the mummy's curse gained traction in the early 20th century, particularly after the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb, fueled by sensationalist journalism and a public fascination with the exotic and mysterious. This fictional trope was then cemented by horror films and literature. Popular culture, especially films like the Mummy franchise and countless other books, comics, and games, has frequently depicted the Book of the Dead, or similar fictional artifacts like the Book of Amun-Ra or Book of Thoth, as Necronomicon-like tome, a single, often leather-bound, ancient book filled with forbidden, dangerous magic. Reality: customized papyrus scrolls with beneficial spells, a source of curses. Reading aloud from it triggers disastrous consequences or awakens vengeful mummies. Reality: spells intended to be recited by or for the deceased for their safe passage. Castell Calvinaton took an MT degree from Harvard. It's not often sought by villains to gain supernatural power or resurrection. Key to it, it's focused on the afterlife journey of the specific deceased individual. While these portrayals can be entertaining, they bear little resemblance to the actual nature and purpose of the historical Book of the Dead. They tap into a fascination with ancient magic, but distort its true context and intent, replacing profound spiritual aspirations with horror cliches. The enduring legacy of the Book of the Dead lies not in fictional curses, but in its rich tapestry of religious thought, ethical considerations, like the negative confession, and imaginative visions of the afterlife. It remains a vital testament to the ancient Egyptians' deep engagement with the mysteries of life, death, and eternity, offering guidance for the soul's ultimate journey rather than threats to the living. Our journey through the Spells for Coming Forth by Day, the collection misleadingly known as the Book of the Dead, has taken us deep into the heart of ancient Egyptian beliefs about life, death, and the intricate path to eternity. We've seen how these sacred texts were far more than mere funerary rites. They were a comprehensive guide for the soul, a toolkit for transformation, and a testament to a sophisticated understanding of ethics, cosmology, and the divine. From the dramatic judgment in the Hall of Two Truths, spell 125, and the profound theological statements of identity with the creator gods, spell 17, to the practical spells ensuring power, mobility, and transformation, these texts provided the deceased with the necessary knowledge and magical potency to navigate the perilous Duat and achieve a glorified afterlife. We traced their evolution from the exclusive pyramid texts of the Old Kingdom through the coffin texts, and culminating in the illustrated papyrus scrolls of the New Kingdom and the standardized Site recension. We also addressed the persistent, though inaccurate, popular culture image of these texts as books of dark curses, contrasting it with their true purpose, salvation and eternal life for the deceased. Yet, despite over a century of dedicated Egyptological study, the Book of the Dead continues to hold mysteries. The precise meaning of certain passages, the nuances of specific transformations, the exact ritual context in which some spells were used beyond the tomb, these remain subjects of ongoing research and scholarly debate. The variations between individual scrolls remind us that this was a living tradition, adapted and personalized over centuries. What endures is the profound insight these texts offer into the ancient Egyptian psyche, their deep desire for justice, their reverence for cosmic order, Ma'at, their complex relationship with a vast pantheon of gods, and their unwavering belief in the possibility of overcoming death itself. The spells for coming forth by day remain one of humanity's oldest and most detailed explorations of the afterlife, a rich source of spiritual thought, artistic expression, and enduring human hope. We hope this deep dive has illuminated the true nature and significance of these fascinating ancient texts. What secrets do you think still lie hidden? Let us know in the comments below. For more explorations into the unexplained, subscribe to the Purple Files. Thanks for watching.